Margaret spent 41 years as a primary school teacher in Ballarat. She never earned a large salary. Nobody in teaching does. But she was careful. She packed her lunch every day. She drove the same Corolla for 14 years. She put money into super every fortnight without fail because someone told her once that compound interest was the eighth wonder of the world and she decided to believe them. By the time she retired at 67, Margaret had $420,000 in superannuation, a modest home in a quiet street worth about $680,000, and $85,000 in a term deposit she kept as her emergency buffer, money she privately thought of as her dignity fund, the money that meant she would never have to ask her children for anything. Her husband Trevor passed in 2023. She managed on her own for 2 years. Then her hip went. Then the falls started. Then her daughter drove up from Melbourne on a Sunday afternoon and had the conversation that families dread but eventually have. Margaret needed residential aged care. Her daughter rang the aged care facility on Monday. By Wednesday, they had a financial assessment form sitting on the kitchen table. And by the following Friday, when the family sat down with a Centrelink financial officer to go through Margaret's assets, Margaret's daughter said something I want you to hear because it is the sentence that is going to stop this from happening to your family. She said, "Nobody told us. Nobody told us any of this." Margaret's aged care costs came back at over $400,000 in projected lifetime fees, means tested against every dollar she had ever saved. Her super, her home, her term deposit, her dignity fund. Every single dollar she had carefully set aside over 41 years of packed lunches and 14-year-old Corollas was now sitting on a government spreadsheet being counted against her. She had not done anything wrong. She had just never been told how the aged care asset test actually works. And she had never been told that there is a legal window, a specific time-limited window, in which the right asset transfers can dramatically reduce what Centrelink counts, legally, permanently, and without a single piece of fraud involved. That window closes the moment you sign the aged care admission form. After that, it is too late. My name is Mitchell Levi, and I am a financial advisor. To get you the information that the aged care system, the Centrelink system, and frankly most financial advisors who don't specialize in this area will never volunteer to you before the form lands on your kitchen table. Not after if you are over 55. If your parents are over 70. If you have a family member approaching residential aged care. If you have superannuation, a family home, or savings above $50,000, what I am about to explain affects you directly. If you are over 55, if your parents are over 70, if you have a family member approaching residential aged care, if you have superannuation, a family home, or savings above $50,000, what I am about to explain affects you directly. The 2026 aged care means test has teeth that most Australians have never seen up close. And the 3 asset moves I'm going to walk you through today are completely legal, completely documented, and completely unavailable to you once the aged care admission process has formally begun. This is not about hiding money. This is not about cheating the system. This is about understanding the machine you are already inside before it starts calculating against you. Stay with me, because at the 7-minute mark, I am going to show you the exact dollar difference between a family that made these moves and a family that didn't. The difference is not small. The difference is the kind of number that changes what you inherit, what your parents keep, and whether the family home gets swallowed by fees before you ever had a choice. Let me explain exactly how the aged care means test works in 2026, because most Australians have a vague idea, and the vague idea is costing them a fortune. When a person enters residential aged care in Australia, 2 things happen financially. First, the government calculates your basic daily fee, currently set at 85% of the single age pension rate. Everyone pays this. It is not means tested. In 2026, it sits at approximately $63 per day, about $23,000 per year, non-negotiable. Second, and this is where it gets serious, the government calculates your means-tested care fee. This is the additional amount you pay on top of the basic fee based on your assessable assets and assessable income. And this number can be devastating. Under the 2026 rules, which include changes introduced by the Aged Care Act 2024 that came fully into force from July 1, 2025, the means-tested fee is calculated on a combined assets and income test. Let me explain exactly how the aged care means test works in 2026, because most Australians have a vague idea, and the vague idea is costing them a fortune. When a person enters residential aged care in Australia, 2 things happen financially. First, the government calculates your basic daily fee, currently set at 85% of the single age pension rate. Everyone pays this. It is not means tested. In 2026, it sits at approximately $63 per day, about $23,000 per year, non-negotiable. Second, and this is where it gets serious, the government calculates your means-tested care fee. This is the additional amount you pay on top of the basic fee based on your assessable assets and assessable income. And this number can be devastating. Under the 2026 rules, which include changes introduced by the Aged Care Act 2024 that came fully into force from July 1, 2025, the means-tested fee is calculated on a combined assets and income test. If Margaret's daughter is not living in that house in Ballarat, and she is not, she has her own home in Melbourne, then the full $680,000 value of Margaret's home is sitting in the means test. Added to her $420,000 in super, added to her $85,000 term deposit, that is $1,185,000 of assessable assets. On $1,185,000 of assessable assets, Margaret's means-tested fee calculation produces a daily fee that, over a projected residential care stay of 5 to 7 years, can approach or exceed $170,000 to $250,000 in total means-tested fees, on top of the basic daily fee she is already paying. And here is the sentence that most financial advisors are not saying loudly enough. That calculation is locked in at the moment of entry. It does not reset. It does not forgive assets you later spend. It calculates from what you had when you walked in the door. This is why the window matters. This is why what you do before entry is everything. Let me introduce you to Barry. Barry is 74. He lives in a 3-bedroom brick home in Toowoomba that he bought in 1987 for $94,000, and that is now worth somewhere around $720,000. He has $380,000 in super. He has no investment properties. He has a modest share portfolio worth about $45,000 that he built himself by reading the financial pages every Saturday morning for 30 years. Barry had a stroke 18 months ago. His recovery was good but not complete. His GP was honest with him. The conversation about residential care was not if, it was when. Barry's son, who lives in Brisbane, did some reading. He found out about the asset test. He rang a financial advisor who specialized in aged care, not a generalist, a specialist, and they had the conversation Barry needed to have 8 months before he actually entered care. 8 months. That was enough. Because the financial advisor told Barry about something called the Centrelink asset test exemption for granny flat interests, told him about the funeral bond threshold, and walked him through how structuring a specific type of contribution to his super before entry could change the income test calculation without touching the asset test figure in the way most people expect. Barry entered residential care 6 months later. His means-tested fee assessment came back at less than half of what it would have been if he had walked in the door the day after his stroke with everything sitting where it was. His son didn't do anything illegal. His son didn't hide anything. His son just made 3 specific asset moves in the right order at the right time with the right documentation. Barry still has enough left over that his grandchildren will receive something meaningful when the time comes. Not because Barry was wealthy, because his family knew the rules before the form arrived. The difference between Margaret's family and Barry's family is not income. It is not luck. It is one conversation that happened before the deadline rather than after it. Now let me walk you through the 3 asset moves. These are not loopholes. These are structures that exist within the aged care legislation and the Social Security Act that most families never hear about until it is too late to use them. Asset 1, the family home and the granny flat interest. The trap most families fall into. When a parent moves into residential aged care, the family home becomes accessible at market value unless a protected person remains in it. Most families assume the solution is to sell the home, use the proceeds to fund aged care, and that is that. This is the most expensive possible outcome. The 2026 update, you must know, from July 1st, 2025 under the new Aged Care Act framework, the assessment of granny flat interest in the context of residential aged care means testing has been tightened. The documentation requirements are stricter. Verbal arrangements no longer provide any protection. The written agreement must be in place before the aged care application is lodged. Not after, not simultaneously, before. If you set this up correctly before entry, the home is no longer assessed at full market value in the means test. If you wait until after the admission form is signed, the home sits in the assessment at full market value for the duration of the stay. That difference on a $700,000 Toowoomba house is not marginal. It is generational. Asset 2, superannuation, the pension phase trap, the one that catches people who did everything right. Here is the thing about superannuation that most pre-retirees do not fully understand until it is too late to rearrange. Superannuation in accumulation phase, money you haven't yet converted to a pension, is assessed differently under the aged care means test than superannuation in account-based pension phase. For a person below age pension age, superannuation in accumulation phase is not counted as an assessable asset for the Centrelink age pension. But for aged care purposes, once you are past preservation age and have met a condition of release, your super balance is fully accessible. However, and this is the critical distinction, the income stream produced by an account-based pension is assessed under the deeming rules, not at full capital value in some circumstances. The structure that aged care specialists work through is this. Here is the thing about superannuation that most pre-retirees do not fully understand until it is too late to rearrange. Superannuation in accumulation phase, money you haven't yet converted to a pension, is assessed differently under the aged care means test than superannuation in account-based pension phase. For a person below age pension age, superannuation in accumulation phase is not counted as an assessable asset for the Centrelink age pension. But for aged care purposes, once you are past preservation age and have met a condition of release, your super balance is fully accessible. However, and this is the critical distinction, the income stream produced by an account-based pension is assessed under the deeming rules, not at full capital value in some circumstances. The structure that aged care specialists work through is this. Depending on your age, your balance, and your income from other sources, it may be significantly advantageous to convert a lump sum super balance into a complying lifetime income stream or a defined benefit-style pension product before entry into aged care. Why? Because certain complying pension products are assessed at a discounted asset value rather than full account balance for means testing purposes. The income is still assessed, but the asset value that sits in the means test calculation can be materially lower than the raw super balance. The 2026 update. The government has confirmed that the grandfathering provisions protecting pre-July 2019 account-based pensions from the income test deeming rules remain in place. But new account-based pensions entered into after that date are fully deemed. If your parent or family member has a pre-2019 account-based pension that has been grandfathered, that grandfathering status is a significant asset. It needs to be reviewed by a specialist before any changes are made, because changing the pension type or fund can permanently break the grandfathering status, and once it is broken, it cannot be restored. This is the kind of thing that costs families $40,000 to $80,000 because they moved super into a different fund without understanding that the move extinguished a protection that had been silently sitting there for years. Asset 3. Funeral bonds and prepaid arrangements, the smallest move with the cleanest outcome. This one is straightforward, but almost never used to its full potential before aged care entry. Under current Centrelink rules, a funeral bond up to the threshold value is exempt from both the age pension asset test and the aged care means test. In 2026, the exempt threshold for a funeral bond is $15,000 per person. For a couple, that is $30,000 removed from the asset test with zero complexity, zero legal documentation beyond the bond itself, and zero ongoing management required. Now, $15,000 sounds modest, and in isolation it is, but here is how it connects to the bigger picture. When you are doing asset restructuring before aged care entry, every dollar that moves out of the assessable asset pool reduces the means-tested fee calculation. The funeral bond is the cleanest, simplest, most auditable move available. It requires no specialist advice to execute. It is documented, it is defensible, and it is permanent. Combined with the granny flat interest restructuring and the super pension conversion, the funeral bond is the third leg of a structure that, done correctly, can reduce the assessable asset pool by hundreds of thousands of dollars, legally, permanently, and before the form arrives. The trap version of this move, families who try to prepay funerals through general funeral parlor deposits, rather than through a complying funeral bond product, do not get the exemption. The exemption applies specifically to a complying funeral bond, a regulated investment product. A receipt from a funeral home is not the same thing. This catches people regularly. The paperwork matters. Let me be direct about something now. The aged care means test in Australia is not a secret. It is on the Services Australia website. It is in the Aged Care Act. It is publicly available to anyone who knows what to search for. But here is what the government does not do. It does not send you a letter at 65 saying, in approximately 5 to 10 years, you or someone you love will likely need residential aged care. Here is how the financial assessment works. Here are the legal structures available to you before entry. Here is the window you have to act. That letter does not exist. What exists instead is a form. It arrives after the fall, after the diagnosis, after the family meeting on a Sunday that nobody wanted to have. It arrives when the family is already overwhelmed and grieving and scared. And it asks for a complete financial picture of everything the person has ever saved, in a format designed for administration, not for understanding. The Aged Care Act 2024 was debated and passed through Parliament in a period when most Australians were thinking about the cost of living, the housing market, and interest rates. The aged care provisions received some media coverage. The means testing changes received almost none, not in language that ordinary Australians could use. The people who knew about it were financial advisors who specialize in aged care, a small, specific group. The people who didn't know about it were the families sitting around kitchen tables in Ballarat and Toowoomba doing their best for parents who spent 40 years doing their best for them. The system is not malicious. It is indifferent. And indifference, when it comes to retirement savings accumulated over decades of careful living, produces the same result as deliberate confiscation. The difference is that indifference can be defeated by information, if the information arrives before the deadline. Let me now give you the timing framework. Because the moves I've described are not equally available at all points in time, the window is specific. 5 or more years before anticipated aged care entry, all 3 moves are available with maximum flexibility. The gifting rules, the granny flat structuring, the pension conversion, all can be done with full planning time. This is the ideal window. Use it. 2 to 5 years before entry, the granny flat interest is still available. The funeral bond is still available. The super pension conversion requires careful assessment because changes to pension phase can interact with the income test in ways that require modeling against your specific balance and income. Specialist advice is essential here, but the moves remain available. 6 months to 2 years before entry. This is Barry's window. It is tight. Not everything is available. But the funeral bond, a correctly documented granny flat interest, and a pension structure review can still produce significant means test reduction. The specialist conversation needs to happen immediately, not next month. Immediately. After the aged care admission form is signed, the asset snapshot is taken. The means tested fee is calculated. Gifts made after entry are assessed under the deprivation rules for 5 years. The home, if unprotected, is in the assessment at full value. The funeral bond can still be purchased, but the timing advantage is gone. You are managing from inside the system now, not before it. The window is real. The deadline is real. And unlike the end of the financial year or a tax lodgement date, this deadline does not announce itself. It arrives with a fall, with a diagnosis, with a Sunday afternoon conversation. Here is what I want you to actually do after watching this video. Step 1. Identify where your family sits on the timeline. Is a parent or family member in good health with 5+ years of likely independent living remaining? Or are they in the 2 to 5 year window? Or are they having falls, managing chronic conditions, and approaching the conversation sooner than expected? Knowing which window you are in determines which moves are available. Step 2. List the 3 asset categories as they exist right now. The family home, who lives in it, what it is worth, what would happen to it if the owner entered care tomorrow. The superannuation balance, what phase it is in when it was established, whether any grandfathering protections apply. The cash and savings, what is held in term deposits, savings accounts, and managed funds, and whether a complying funeral bond has been established. Step 3. Find an aged care financial specialist, not a generalist financial planner, not a bank advisor, a person who holds the accredited aged care professional designation or equivalent and who works with aged care means testing specifically. Ask them to model 2 scenarios, your current asset position if care entry happened today, and your projected position after implementing the 3 structures I've described. The difference between those 2 numbers is your planning gap. It is the amount the means test will take from your family if you act and the amount it will take if you don't. Step 4. If your family home is the largest asset, get a written aged care financial plan that specifically addresses the granny flat interest option, whether it is appropriate for your family structure, what the Centrelink reasonableness test produces for your parents' age, and what documentation is required. Step 5. Purchase a complying funeral bond today. This week, not next month. It is the lowest complexity, highest certainty move available to almost everyone, and it removes $15,000 from the asset test permanently. It costs nothing except the decision to do it. Let me come back to Margaret. Margaret is in residential care now. She is comfortable. She is safe. The staff are kind. Her hip is managed. She has a window that looks out over a garden, and she has photos of her grandchildren on the shelf beside it. She does not regret going into care. She is grateful she is being looked after. What she thinks about sometimes, in the quiet of a Tuesday afternoon, is the Corolla, the packed lunches, the 41 years of careful, deliberate, small decisions that added up to something. That added up to $420,000 in super, and a house in Ballarat and a term deposit she privately called her dignity fund. She thinks about whether her grandchildren will see any of it. She hopes so. She doesn't know yet, because no one told her about the 3 moves before the form arrived. And now the calculation is locked in and the window is closed and the means tested fee is running every single day against the money she spent 41 years building. Somewhere right now, there is another Margaret. She is 68 or 70 or 72. She packed her lunches too. She drove her car until the tires went. She put money into super without fail because someone told her once that it would add up. It has added up, and the aged care means test is waiting, not because anyone planned for it to catch her, but because no one told her it was coming. You now know it is coming. The system is indifferent. It calculates what it is entitled to calculate from the people who never found out in time, and it leaves the rest for the families who did. Margaret's story does not have to be your parents' story, but the only thing standing between those 2 outcomes is whether this conversation happens before the form arrives or after it. Share this video with your family tonight, not when you remember. Tonight, the window is open right now. It will not always be. This is Mitchell Levi. I will see you in the next one.